of fasting, he does what he did when he changed the Qibla. He gives us a new law of fasting. No longer will we fast with the Jews on the days when they fast, which are dispersed during the year, but rather we now have one consolidated fast over a period of one lunar month. And then he says, you're permitted to eat and you're permitted to drink during the nights of fasting. This fellow in Lahore, he said, the Lord permitted me. So he spends the whole night of Ramadan eating and drinking, because the Lord said, eat and drink until the break of dawn. So he eats and he drinks until the break of dawn. He live like this now. The Lord says, you're permitted to eat and drink. He didn't say you have to spend the whole night eating and drinking. So a new law of fasting. We were not allowed to eat and drink in the night. No. And then, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ رَفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. You're now allowed to go to your wives on the nights of fasting. So there are lots of smiles in Medina now, because it was difficult for us to stay away from our wives nights of fasting. When you drink cabbage milk, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. It is now halal for you to go to your wives on the nights of fasting. هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. They are your garments, you are their garments. The body and the garment are inseparable. But then the verse went on to say, عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Khana, yakhunu means to betray, to be false. Allah knows what you used to be doing during the nights of fasting. When you were supposed to be fasting in accordance with the law of Quran, staying away from your wives, Allah knows what you used to be doing. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ, but Allah has now turned towards you mercifully. وَعَفَى عَنْكُمْ, and Allah has forgiven you. فَالْآنَ, and so now, بَاشِرُهُنَّ, embrace them, your wives. And when you embrace them, وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Now seek for what Allah has written for you, meaning Allah writes. A family planning association, I don't like this piece. Allah writes how many children you will have. And Allah writes when you will have the children. Family planning association, which is now the new God, says no. You must take over, you must write, called Planned Parenthood, how many children you must have, and when you have the children. So no need for God anymore. You're taking over for Him, you do the right thing yourself. And so a new law of fasting, and a consolidated month of fasting. And it is really making news in Medina. But the question remains, why now? What is the context of the revelation of the fast of Ramadan? Previously in our Usul al-Tafsir, we had something called Asbab al-Tanzil, meaning the historical circumstances connected with the revelation. Does somebody beat up his wife, and then the matter provoked a revelation to come down? It's connected with that event. And this is what Asbabul Tanzeel has been so far restricted to. Now the context. And to understand the context, you've got to understand the big picture. Allah has sent down the fast of Ramadan now in a context in which we have the change of Qibla, the parting from the Jews, a new Ummah being born, the warning that you will not be able to preserve your freedom and independence unless you are prepared to fight for it, regardless of Security Council of the UN. And so fighting is now made obligatory on you. And if you do not fight, you will be slaves. Like our Indonesian sisters, who now are slaves in Singapore, serving those who are hostile to Islam, and doing that for slave wages. I told them that in Indonesia. I said, this is shameful, and this is disgraceful, and this is haram, and all the men of this region will have to answer to Allah for that on the last day. For every Indonesian male who committed suicide, and so many of them, serving those who are hostile to Islam, which is haram, and doing so for slave wages. I asked, when last did you see a Singaporean woman working in Indonesia as a maid? They said, it's a laugh. I said, when last did you see an American woman working in Indonesia as a maid? Now they're really laughing. Did Allah ordain that your women must be slaves for the whole region? Will a Malaysian woman work for the wages that an Indonesian works for as a maid? If she would not, then these are slave wages. And slave wages means oppression. If you do not fight, you'll become slaves. But fighting requires power. And power is of two dimensions. It's not unidimensional. There is an external dimension to power. George Bush has a lot of it. Cruise missiles and so on. But that's not the only dimension to power. There is an internal dimension to power. There's external power and there is internal power. The fast of Ramadan has come down to deliver power. That's the context in which it came down. But Ramadan comes and Ramadan goes. And those who have to teach the subject never teach it this way. Because the usul al-tafsir is inadequate. That is why. The fast of Ramadan came to deliver internal power. So when you fight, you will fight with internal power. And you'll always defeat those who are fighting because they want a green card. Yeah. 1 in every 10 who's killed in Iraq is an immigrant from Guatemala or Honduras or Mexico or someplace fighting for a green card. Fighting for the US dollar. Mercenaries. That's what they are about that. Mercenaries. Yes, they may have all the weapons in the world. But if you have internal power, you're more than a match for them. How does the fast of Ramadan deliver internal power? What do you do when you fast? The language is unique. Allah says 2 words, only 2 words. He says as-sawmu li. First person. He uses the first person singular. Intimate language. Intimate for her everyday language. Intimate.